Hi, you guys. So, did I tell you about the time that I assaulted a Verizon employee? It wasn't my finest moment. And actually, it happened yesterday. Let me tell you what happened. It was great. So, I got this brand new phone. It's a great phone. I love this phone, except for when it doesn't work. So, I had to be downtown to a friend's birthday party. And so I'm sitting there driving sprightly along, and my phone is telling me directions. And finally, I get downtown, and it says GPS signal lost. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not a big deal. I'll just keep driving around mindlessly until I can find a new satellite to connect to. And so that didn't quite happen. I kept driving around, realizing it wasn't going to reconnect. So I stopped in the middle of nowhere. It was already getting dark, and I'm sitting there on the side of the street looking around. There's like hobos walking around and sleeping in door frames, and there was graffiti, and it was a really bad part of town. And then I was like, you know what? This is not awesome because I could probably get like raped or something and someone's going to come and steal my tire rims. I know someone's going to steal my tire rims. So I'm sitting there completely paranoid. It's not connecting. I can't do anything about it. Finally, I reboot the phone, and after about 5 minutes about that, it's been like 20 minutes now at this point, and it reconnects. And I finally get to the party and I tell my friend, my phone, the GPS wasn't working. So she's like, dude, you should like take it to the store and they'll like totally fix it for you. I'm like, okay. So I go up to the counter. I'm like, hey, I just want to trade out this phone. Exact same phone. That's all I want you to do because it's having problems with the GPS and it got stuck in the middle of nowhere and it was really scary and I can't have that happen, especially because next week I'm going on a trip. And they're like, oh, okay, well, let's see if we can fix it for you and try to reproduce the problem. And so the guy goes behind the counter and he's messing with the phone and he's like, well, it looks like it's connecting right now. And I'm like, well, duh, because it's sitting in a fixed location and there's no satellite for it to move and jump onto. So they sit there and they're poking at it and they can't reproduce the problem. And I'm sitting there like, come on now. And I'm like, can you just give me a new one? They said, no, we can't give you a new one unless we can reproduce the problem in store. I'm like, but you can't do that probably because it's only when you're driving around. The problem being that it can't reconnect to an antenna that's over there versus one that's, that I've been tracking right now. So it's having trouble connecting to the antennas. And the guy just stared at me like this. Like a complete and total imbecile. And I'm like, can I talk to a manager? And so I'm getting really, really pissed off at this point. And the guy comes over to me and says, well, we can give you a new phone if you pay $35 restocking fee, and then you can just essentially repurchase it. At that point, I grabbed the dude from behind the counter, scrunched him up into this little itty-bitty ball. It was like this rubber ball. And then I went over and I looked at the other employees, and I took, with my magic rays in my eyes, I shrunk them to the size of little peanuts. And so, except for the three Verizon employees that were very, very nice, I liked them very much, so I wouldn't harm them. I gave them an ice cream sundae instead. No, so I found a box and I shoved all the rest of the employees in there, including that idiot manager, and I had my ball, and then I ran outside, and I was like bouncing this ball. I'm like, okay, what can I do with all these people? And so I ran into the Wendy's, and I gave the ball to this little girl who was sitting there munching on some fries, and so the first thing she did was like pop that ball into her mouth and was just gnawing on it. I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do with the rest of these little dudes? And so I walked into the bathroom, and they were screaming inside the box, and I was tipping it and laughing because, I just had to get some anger out. And I grabbed one from inside the box, and I hung him on the toilet rim, and took the other ones and hung them on the toilet rim until I had this whole, wonderful circle of screaming Verizon employees, who were utterly unhelpful. And I started flushing that toilet, just waiting until some of them went down the toilet and were screaming. It was great. They were going around faster and faster in circles until finally the manager was like, okay, I'm sorry. And so I grabbed them, the remaining of them, and I went into the store, and they had to get me a new phone behind the counter, and that's how I got my new phone. And then I decided to let the rest of them, become humans again. They're all wet and nasty. And they called the police on me. Yeah, the police get there, and they don't believe anything that they said. So, of course, I get to walk away scot-free with a brand new phone. Yeah. And, yeah. But, actually none of that happened. And they just told me to go call Verizon customer service.